Hello, everybody. I decided to make this presentation to inform and educate everybody on how to naturally increase your testosterone levels. There's going to be a lot of context in here. It's going to be very scientific, so please bear with me. I'll try not to go too crazy with it. It does get very complicated, or it can get very complicated. I will try my best to keep everything in layman's terms so it's easy to understand. But let's just get into it. So first off, I am going to be breaking down the science behind testosterone. First of all, explaining how it's made and the effect that cholesterol has in it. Cholesterol, is a lipid. It's a waxy substance that our body produces. It's also a precursor for almost all steroid hormones, which is a key part about all this. I'm also going to go over how to increase all these your levels naturally with proven ways and scientific studies that have shown significant increases in testosterone levels, as well as some general guidelines on how to kind of just track your levels, especially if you don't have access to a clinic. It is very important to get your levels just so you at least have a baseline. If you think you're deficient by any means, I highly suggest getting a blood test and seeing what your levels are at so you can understand how to build a lifestyle that can help you increase those levels. So first off, we are going to explain. Okay, so this is not working. Great. The liver. The liver is a very important organ, one of the most important in our bodies. The liver, in this context, is going to be most important for understanding where cholesterol comes from. So you might be very familiar of cholesterol, like in eggs or in animal products that we can eat, but a lot of things, or one thing that most people don't understand is that our body actually doesn't need dietary cholesterol. The liver is the main storage site and the main site where cholesterol is produced. Therefore, if you completely cut out cholesterol from your diet, you will still have cholesterol circulating around your body. But if your liver is compromised, or you have liver disease, or just any type of liver issue, obviously this process won't be as effective and your cholesterol levels can get out of whack. So it's important to understand that more doesn't always mean better, right? Because essentially, if your liver is working the way it should be, if your cholesterol levels get too high, it will excrete and remove that cholesterol. Or if it's too low, it should begin to produce more. So just keep that in the back of your mind. This next slide will kind of elaborate a little bit more on why that is. But just remember, cholesterol is made in the liver, and cholesterol is a precursor to testosterone. So testosterone comes from cholesterol. So dietary cholesterol. This study, found in Lipids and Health and Disease, was a cross-sectional study that studied men aged 20 to 80 years old between 1996 all the way to like 2014. And it was a cross-sectional study, so they looked at all the factors. They didn't have an intervention. They're looking at studies that had an intervention. So the main thing was dietary cholesterol. They realized that the more cholesterol you eat, your total testosterone concentrations did not increase. So although that testosterone is made from cholesterol, it doesn't mean more is better. It is important to also realize that we should maybe have like some randomized control trials that do like put people on a diet, a high cholesterol diet versus low cholesterol, and then a baseline, and see how all those compare with your testosterone levels. That's basically it for this one. I don't want to take too long. So just keep all those things, cholesterol, testosterone, liver, all these things are very, very connected. Well, that's a big question. If you don't know what testosterone is, it is the main androgen that gives men their male characteristics. So testosterone is not present, or it's present in very minimal amounts until you hit puberty. That's when all these very unique features start to present themselves in a young man during puberty, such as your voice deepening, more muscle mass, growth spurts, hair patterns, you name it. You know what puberty is essentially. Also, it is important to understand that testosterone stimulates the production of red blood cells, so that's why men typically have more blood cells than women, just because of testosterone, because it increases kind of everything. Also, that is an anabolic steroid. Testosterone is an anabolic steroid. I'm not going to dive too deep into performance enhancing drugs. I think that it can have its own video dedicated to it. So, testosterone, the main thing that you really need to understand, other than the fact that it's made from cholesterol, is that it's made in the testes. So that's one of the main differences that we have between men and women. Obviously, women don't have testes, therefore they cannot synthesize the amount of testosterone that a man can. And to be a little bit more specific, testosterone is actually synthesized in the Leydig cells, which are in the testes. So the Leydig cells are the number one place of synthesis. So now that we know that where it's produced and how it's produced, it would be optimal to take care of these cells, to look after these cells, because they are the ones that are actually in charge of releasing and producing these hormones. And that, other than testosterone being an anabolic hormone, is an anti-catabolic hormone, which means that it doesn't just build, like give you building blocks for your body. It also mitigates the catabolic effects that certain stress can have. So it is a very very powerful hormone, to say the least. Well, you might have heard of this before, aromatase. If you didn't know by now, estrogen or estradiol also comes from testosterone. That is a very, very common misconception that people just don't know about. I think it might not even be a misconception, but it's just something that is very looked over. And aromatase is a key enzyme that converts, these androgens, these masculine hormones, into estrogen and estradiol. So, just keep that. I'm just mentioning that for a little bit. Keep that in the back of your mind, and it'll all make sense very soon. Well, people think that estrogen and testosterone are almost the opposite hormones, just because you associate one with men and the other one with women. But the thing is we both have these hormones, just at different amounts. So it's definitely more about the balance, and having good ranges of these hormones, because if you're too low, then it can be detrimental, and if it's too high, it could also be detrimental. So it's all about balance. And the main difference, again, the reason why women have so much more estrogen than men is because they have ovaries. That is where estrogen is produced. And men don't have ovaries, so they can't produce that much estrogen, but they still can. How? With aromatase. Aromatase was that enzyme that I told you about the last slide. So it means that you literally can't have estrogen without testosterone. But that's mostly talking about in men, because women don't need that much testosterone because they already produce their own estrogen. So estradiol, it is estrogen. Estrogens have these three different classes, and estradiol, which is the one that aromatase converts to, is the strongest, most active estrogen. So out of all of them, this is going to be the one that we're mostly going to be focused on. And we want to mitigate that. We don't want that to get too high. We also don't want it to get too low. So one of the only ways that we can actually have estrogen is through aromatase. And what increases aromatase? This enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen. Well, one of the main things is that it is active in visceral fat. So like belly fat, they have found large amounts of aromatase enzyme in there. So if you have a high body fat, if you have insulin resistance, you can't process glucose all that effectively and your insulin levels are compromised, that increases the amount of aromatase enzyme circulating. Alcohol intake increases the amount of aromatase enzymes, and also certain medications. So those are the main gist between testosterone, aromatase, and estrogen, and the difference between men and women, right? So let's dive into the good stuff. Testosterone reducing factors. You will recognize that one of the main goals here is not just increasing testosterone, but you would rather focus on decreasing the things that decrease your testosterone, right? Like, it's like a back and forth battle, like kind of like tug of war. It's like you're not necessarily increasing it, you would rather just reduce certain things that decrease it, right? So what is the number one thing that reduces testosterone? Age is one thing that we cannot control, and I want to give you the textbook definition of aging. So at the biological level, aging results from the impact of accumulation of a wide variety of cellular damage. This leads to gradual decrease in physical and mental capacity, a growing risk of disease, and ultimately death. These changes are neither linear nor consistent, and they are only loosely associated with a person's age in years. The diversity seen in older age is not random. Beyond biological changes, aging is often associated with other life transitions, such as retirement, relocation, and death of friends and partners, etc. So, like I said, number one thing, if you can tell, these graphs, let's just mostly focus on these two, show the fluctuations of testosterone, during your lifetime. And as you can tell, literally all of these peak at around between 20 and 30 years of age. So that is the ages where we have the most testosterone circulating, where it's peaking, where we're getting that big influx of testosterone naturally, is during these years. So before these years, you're like lower because you haven't hit puberty all that much, you're not fully developed, and then after, it's because you're just getting old. Simple as that. You're getting old and your body doesn't produce as much as it used to. So that's one thing that we kind of can't control, but we can mitigate the factors of like what makes us actually feel older, right? Like we can't stop time, but we can improve our lifestyle habits to be able to live longer and more efficiently. Number 2 reducing factor is alcohol. Many studies have shown that a large amount of alcohol is associated with a reduction in serum testosterone. And this is due to one reason why it's due to this is because the liver is in charge of synthesizing or metabolizing alcohol. And if you can remember, the liver is also, the main storage of cholesterol, which is the precursor of testosterone. As well, there's been other studies that show that ethanol and acetaldehyde are important toxins for the Leydig cells. So these Leydig cells that you have in your testes, when you consume large amounts of alcohol, they are impaired and they have a reduced cell function. So, for example, the reduced production of testosterone in the Leydig cells is due to an inhibitory action of alcohol on enzymes that catalyze the conversion of pregnenolone to progesterone, which are all precursors to testosterone. So it just shows that alcohol enhances the production of like this inflammation and oxygen species that suppress these signaling pathways to produce more testosterone. So essentially, you're altering your synthesis of testosterone when you consume large amounts of alcohol. And I repeat large amounts of alcohol because there have been very many studies that show that if you only consume a little bit of alcohol, like around less than 5 drinks a week, then you're good. But if you are a heavy user, consuming over 15, 12, depending on your body mass, not really, like it does, but at the same time it doesn't. If you're consuming more than 15 drinks a week, you're definitely impairing your synthesis and your metabolism of hormones. Another important thing to realize is that testosterone is released during your sleep. Like, this is why when you get tested, if you want to go get a serum test of testosterone, you'll always do it in the morning when you're fasted, probably between 8 to 10 a.m. This is because during sleep, testosterone levels begin to rise before they peak towards the end of the night, like around 7 a.m., like I said, 7 to 9 a.m. And then it kind of gradually decreases through the day. Those slowly start to increase after you fall asleep, and they peak, like I said, during the late night. So this study shows 10 male participants, average age of 24, with a BMI of 23, were selected after screening. They met the inclusion criteria, and they spent 11 days in a controlled lab setting, studying their sleep. So they experienced 3 nights of extended sleep of 10 hours per night to establish a baseline, and then they did 8 nights of sleep restriction, which means limited to 5 hours per night. And then they collected blood samples with a small catheter throughout the day. And the results show that this partial sleep restriction group had significantly lower levels throughout the day compared to the rested condition. And these were significant findings, just to show you the impact that sleep does have on testosterone levels. This is a very, very promising study. I think it's very credible, and it just shows you how important sleep can be. Some tips for that would be just to stick to a routine, go to bed at the same time, and try to wake up at the same time every day. Of course, try to get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. It's going to be a pretty good window. Anything less than that, you might be compromising your production. Ditch your phone, ditch the sleep, try to wind down, have a good routine, like I said, like shower, eat, whatever the case may be, whatever gets you ready, whatever gets you sleepy, try to do that probably an hour before going to sleep. Make sure you're in a comfortable setting, like nice cool temperature, you're comfortable, and try to probably just avoid caffeine before bed, because sometimes you can have trouble sleeping if you've consumed caffeine a little too close to bedtime. But essentially, sleep is very important. It can reduce testosterone levels, and if you lock it in, you can increase it. So like I said, you're like mitigating these side effects. Some honorable mentions at lower testosterone would be nutrition quality, low protein diets, excessive soy consumption, a sedentary lifestyle, chronic stress, and of course hypogonadism. And all hypogonadism is like you have an actual, like you've been diagnosed to not produce enough testosterone. Like even if you don't take these steps to improve your lifestyle and increase your levels before getting tested, it might be very easy to get diagnosed with hypogonadism. But if you at least try and then go get tested and you're still low, then yes, it might be a sign that you have hypogonadism. And all these things kind of just contribute to supporting a good lifestyle. Like if your nutrition isn't locked in, if you're consuming low protein, the soy would have to be just excessive amounts, because they have phytoestrogens that can get converted to estrogen. I wouldn't be too worried about that. I would definitely focus on what I said, like your sleep and nutrition, exercise. I'm gonna elaborate more on that, but these are just like some things that could be impacting your levels, and that they do. Like if you're stressed out, you're gonna have more cortisol, you're gonna have more fat. Like all these things are very interconnected, and it makes sense why they would contribute to lower levels. Just real quick, just in case you didn't know some of the signs of high and low testosterone. So with high T, you're going to have a higher energy, you're going to have a stronger sex drive, you're probably going to be leaner and have less body fat, and you're just going to feel more almost dominant. Like when people say that you get roid rage, whatever, like testosterone is probably the most commonly used steroid, and it's for a reason, because it is literally the most effective one. And kind of to touch on the aromatase thing, like remember, if we have too much testosterone, our body will eventually convert it into estrogen, because it has nowhere else to do. Like other than excreting it, it will convert it to estrogen. So that's why a lot of people who are on performance enhancing drugs pair the testosterone with aromatase inhibitors, the enzyme that is in charge of converting testosterone into estrogen. And so it's like a whole mitigation deal, and you're like messing with your hormones. It's very complicated, but I'm gonna put my hands off and leave it to the professionals on that one. So low T is basically the exact opposite of high T. You're tired, you have fatigue, you have a low sex drive, you have muscle loss and maybe just low muscle quantities, and you just kind of can't think clearly. You're kind of in a weird zone of just mental fog. Okay, so I want to come on here real fast. My camera actually, I think it ran out of space or something. I stopped recording for basically the second half of the video. So I'm just going to split this up into a 2-part series. It actually makes more sense, it makes it shorter, makes everything a whole lot better. So stay tuned for part 2. But again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you can apply these things to your everyday lifestyle. Like I said, part 2 is on the way. It's going to be very direct and basically in the same format, but I was having some issues with it, and I'm just going to have to record it again. So, oh well. That's really about it. Thanks for watching. Till next time.